Well, hello, folks, and welcome to the Melhorn Fishing Podcast. I hope you're having a good day, whatever day it is that you happen to be checking the podcast out here. Today, we're going to talk about a little bit of stuff about the catfish tournament world and whether the catfish tournament world is ready to go to the next level. But first, I want to thank everybody for stopping by. Any of you regular listeners to the podcast, I appreciate you checking it out. And if any of you folks have picked this up on YouTube, I appreciate you stopping by and watching the video version of the podcast. You can also listen to it. Dieter Melhorn Fishing Podcast is on all the major podcast platforms that are out there. And I also do a video version of most of them on YouTube. There are some of them that I don't put up on there. Sometimes some of the more quick ones. But I've been putting these up for a while now. People seem to like it. Some people are not savvy to the podcast world or vice versa. So people can watch, stream, listen, look at whatever on YouTube. Or they can listen to it on a podcast. I know a lot of you guys like listening to the podcast like I do when I'm traveling on the road, in a car, truck, flying somewhere. They're great to listen to. So another way to get more information out there to people, share it with people, and hopefully create some better stewards of the resource. You can find all this stuff, links to podcasts, YouTube, fishing gear, my guide service. I do guide trips, licensed captain, doing fishing trips in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, Lake Wylie, Lake Norman, Lake Wateree, a little bit on the Santee, a little bit down at the coast, but all of it's on my website, DieterMelhornFishing.com. But yeah, what I was going to talk about today, a little bit on the catfish tournament world. And just where it's at, obviously there's tournaments all over the country. Everything from little fruit jar tournaments to some of the bigger ones. One of the biggest and best catfish tournament series in the nation is right here in my backyard, the Southeastern Catfish Club. They put out the best catfish tournament anywhere. Very well managed. They run it through the winter, which is very smart. It starts out in the fall, goes into early May. They stay away from the hotter summer months where there's more stress on the fish. They do a good job of drawing a lot of boats every week. When this thing started out way back when, it was getting 15, 20 boats. Now it's 50, 60, 70 boats for a tournament. And it's a very well-run organization. One of the first in the nation to reduce the limit on the number of fish that were being weighed in, which I commend them for. And they do a great job. And there's other tournaments around. There's a lot more tournaments that are trying to step up to the next level, I guess you would say. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. It's just, what is the catfish world ready for? Everybody that fishes a tournament sooner or later wants more money. They want to make more money. They want bigger payouts. They look at the bass fishing world and they go, wow, look at these bass fishing guys. How much, they're making in a tournament. They can win $100,000 for winning one of these Elite Series tournaments. And so there's more and more talks. And people have dabbled into it. Every catfish tournament, just so you guys know, I know of none, and I may be wrong, would love to hear from you on this, that actually have any significant sponsor money going into it that is contributed to the purse. Basically, it's self-funded. It's basically gambling. It's a pool of people that put their money into a pot, and then you go out and fish to see who wins that pot of money. It is not like somebody like a Sea Ark that would come in and provide a $100,000 first prize or a $5,000 or a $100 first prize. It's all self-funded. It's just like going to a poker table. You put money down and you bet, and you get your money from the guy next to you. And that's the way the catfish tournaments work. Some of the bigger tournaments out there, like in the bass fishing world and stuff, they get sponsorship money that is contributed to it. But even those tournaments, for the most part, are funded by the anglers themselves. And that's just kind of the way that the whole formula works, the business model works. So, to win more money, you need more money in the pot. To get more money in the pot, you need a higher entry fee. Let's face it, if you got a $100 entry fee, you got 20 boats, well, you can do the math and you can see there's no way you're going to win $50,000 in that tournament. So What people have done has been that they've kind of incrementally increased these entry fees, kind of to see what the price point is, to see what the market will tolerate. We saw Cabela's do this a few years ago, where they slowly raised their rate in what it was costing to enter a tournament. The result was not really good for the tournament series. We saw fewer and fewer anglers fishing the tournaments. And part of that may have been entry fee. Part of that may have been the way the tournament series is run, its reputation. That's a whole discussion for another day. But we did not see a lot of people jumping on board with it. Since then, there have been some tournaments around, more regional, that have had higher entry fees, $500 to get into one of these tournaments. And we've seen a decent turnout for them, some of them more than others, but it hasn't really, there's not a lot of people jumping on board with it, because let's face it, for most people, they're not making a living fishing for catfish. This is just a fun thing. As I've said before, it's a little betting, gambling thing, and they're going to try to make some money. So there's not anybody, it's not like the bass fishing world. It's hard to compare it to that, where to fish the Elite Series, I think it's $45,000, $50,000 to fish all of their events for a year. They have pretty high entry fees. At one point back when ESPN owned it, I think it was up around $5,000 per tournament to enter one of these tournaments. Now, granted, they had no shortage of people to pay the money and get into it, but that's a little different level there with the way they do things and how they do payouts and how much money is paid out all the way down the line. So, which brings me to this latest tournament, and I've had some people message me about this. There's been talk about this one called the Mississippi River Monsters Mega Bucs Pro Series. This came out earlier this year in 2021. I think George Young may have fired this one across the bow to see what the reaction was going to be to it. No specific date on it. I think this was let's throw some feelers out there to see what's going on and see if we can pull this together. I'm reading some of the information here off the little flyer. What it says is based on 50 teams. You have to get 50 teams to enter before any of these numbers are going to work out. 2-day event. They say $120,000 up for grabs. That is based on a $2,500 per team entry fee. That's a two-man team, $2,500 to enter this tournament. To my knowledge, this is the highest entry fee that has been put out there for a catfish tournament. This would be the first. It says, again, based on getting 50 teams to sign up for this, first place would pay $50,000, which would be one of the highest payouts ever, if not the highest payout in catfish tournament world. On it pays all the way down through 10th place, which pays out $2,000. So with a $5,000 big fish prize. So it goes on to say the final 4 teams after day 1 have the choice to compete on day 2 for the top prizes or split the top 4 places equally for $23,750 a person. More to come is where it is left there. It doesn't say exactly where, but it's showing the travel and tourism icon for Helena, Arkansas. So probably somewhere out in that area. So the question is a tournament this big going to fly? Is the catfish world ready? Does it have enough ballers and enough players and enough pro level people to shell out $2,500 to get 50 teams to show up? It's a good question. I think part of it's going to depend on the location. I think wherever they're having it in here, which sounds more centrally located in the U.S., I think they've got a lot better chance of doing something like that than they would to have it very far east or very far south. I just think you've got a better chance to draw people in. But $2,500 is a lot of money for 50 folks to gamble to fish a tournament. And it will be interesting to see how many people they get to sign up and show up for this. I don't know that the catfish tournament world is ready for that. I may be totally wrong. There may be, some folks that are going to step. I'm sure there will be folks that will step up, can you get 50 teams to do is the question. One thing about the catfish tournament world is, and this is no offense to my fellow anglers out there that are fishing and fishing tournaments, but there's not as much money in the catfish world as there is like in the saltwater world. There are plenty of tournaments where $2,500 is just one division in a saltwater tournament. Some of these places will pay $25,000, $30,000 to enter one of these saltwater tournaments, a billfish tournament across the board. So I don't know if there's the money in all the players that are in the catfish tournament world right now to do that. And, you know, will that change? I don't see it happening anytime soon. I just think there is a socio-economic divide between the catfish world and a lot of the other fishing world, the bass fishing world, and obviously saltwater fishing, which is a total different ball game and a totally different level. You know, is that good? Is that bad? Well, I don't think it's either, to be perfectly honest. It just kind of is what it is with where we're at right now in catfish, chasing catfish, catfishing. There's some good and bad with tournaments. I mean, let's face it, there is a lot of pressure put on these fisheries. These tournaments, some of these other tournaments where you're getting 100, 150, 200 boats, that's a lot of fishermen, a lot of people out there pounding the water fishing for these fish, stressing fish, putting pressure on fish, especially when they do these things in the summertime. So tournaments have some good points and some bad points. And the bad thing about when you start putting that kind of money into it, people start to overlook the bad points, the downsides, the stuff that is... It becomes more about the money and less about the fish and less about the fishery and less about being good stewards of the resource. So that could be a downside. The positive, you know, a lot of times people say it brings more people into the sport. I don't necessarily believe that, especially when it's going to cost you $2,500 to enter a fishing tournament. I do think it creates some excitement. It can create some exposure, as education, knowledge, if done correctly. My big concern, again, when you start bringing a lot of money into these tournaments, I think you have people that are motivated more by the money, the income, those revenue streams, than they are by the fish. So you got to get a balance. You got to get some people who are in charge of these tournaments and running these tournaments that are willing to do what's right versus doing what pads their pocketbook. So that's kind of my take on the bigger, more expensive, higher end tournaments. You know, the other thing is they exclude a lot of people too. That's the other thing. Because there's a lot of people that can't fish them. I think probably some of the smaller fruit jar tournaments, your local club on your local lake, something even almost a step smaller than the club that I love here, Southeastern Catfish Club. There's another group that does one out on Lake Wiley. They'll get 10, 15, 20 boats. I think there is a lot more for anglers to learn in a tournament that level than there is in a bigger tournament. Because let's face it, guys, okay? Nobody is going to tell you or teach you or help you in any way whatsoever when it comes to these big tournaments. Now, there may be some little niche groups there that will be helping each other. You got some buddies that are, you know, doing, but if you're new to fishing, new to tournament fishing, you're not going to get too much information at these tournaments because, hey, listen, everybody's trying to win the money. They're trying to get theirs. And the smaller tournaments, less money on the line, there's a little less pressure. People still want to win, don't get me wrong. They still want to, you know, be the man and get the money and get the prize. But you're a little more likely to get some help and some information and helping you learn. So I don't know that these are necessarily as good for growing the sport as they are for growing attention to tournament fishing. And that can be good. That can be bad. Like we said earlier, there's some good points and some bad points to it. So, do I want to see it happen? Do I think it's, you know, do I want to see them get it? I really, honestly don't care. You're not going to see me paying $2,500 out of my pocket to enter a fishing tournament. If there's a sponsor, has a promotional deal they want to do with it, I have no problem with doing that. I'm not willing to gamble $2,500 to go fishing, especially to go fishing in some place that I've never fished before. Sorry, I ain't that good. I ain't that lucky, and I would be a fool to give away that much money just to fish a tournament. So, but for some people, there are going to be some people out there who are going to do it, and they could be the ones that could change the game in the future. So we'll see. Again, if this can be done in a way that looks out for the resources, I think it can be good. I think it's some good attention, but I'm pessimistic about that at best. I hate to be that way, but I've seen the way some of these other tournaments have I've seen where their attention lies. And I'm not super enthusiastic about it. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting to see, one, if this tournament happens and how many people show up. And I'll say this, I will have a totally different perspective if they get 50 boats at $2,500 a pop to come in and fish this thing. We may be at another level in the tournament world, but that remains to be seen. That's a lot of moving parts and stuff has to happen for all this to, come to be. So we'll be looking forward in 2022. It's scheduled roughly right now for October of 2022. So it'll be interesting to see what the heck happens with all this. So that's kind of my take on all of that. I just thought it was interesting. I had some people message me about this. This came out a few months ago, and it's kind of been on the back burner in my mind, and I saw it here on my computer and some of the notes about it. I said, you know what, this may be interesting to discuss. I'd love to get some feedback from you guys on just what your take is, because most of my viewers and listeners to the podcast, they're not tournament fishermen. There may be a few out there, but I have more people that are like myself that are really into fishing for catfish, or they're learning how to fish for catfish. And, I was at that point, years ago when I first started fishing. I was like, hey, I want to fish a tournament, see if I can learn something, see how I compare, all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of people have that kind of evolution when they're learning to fish for catfish, bass, crappie, striper, whatever, even the saltwater world. You kind of want to prove yourself, so to speak. A lot of us go through that. But I'd be curious to get some feedback from you guys in the comment section, or emails or texts. And if you want to send me an email, go to my website, DieterMelhornFishing.com. In the contact section, you can email me. I know it's harder to do that here on the podcast if you're listening to it. But, I'd be curious to get your feedback on from some of you folks that may be more casual anglers and have not been exposed to the tournament world. Tournaments even on your radar. Is that something you even think about doing? Is that something you even are interested in? I'm sure some of you are, and some of you are probably just wanting to go have some fun with your family. And would rather spend $2,500 going on a big road trip somewhere to go fishing, maybe in a couple of different places, than to go gamble that money in hopes that you get lucky enough to catch some fish and win $10,000 and $50,000. So that's kind of my take on it. That's the way I look at it. I would rather use that money to go somewhere to fish, to have an adventure of my own, instead of, one day of fishing. Because the one thing about tournaments is, and several tournament partners told me this. They said, man, unless you win, no matter how good a day you had out there, it ain't good enough unless you win. And at least for people like me that are competitive, that's the way you look at it. Some people, maybe they can legitimately go out there and say, oh, we had a good time, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, I think most people are truly competitive that are willing to put up this kind of money to enter a fishing tournament. They want to win. And if they don't win, they may say they had a good time. They probably did, but they're still going home bummed out that they didn't win. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just my perspective, but that's the way my attitude. I know on a lot of guy trips, we'll get out there, we'll have a really good day, and we'll catch some fish, and, people will bring up a tournament. I said, well, guess what? You had a really good day today. You had a wonderful time, but if you're fishing a tournament, you may go to the scales and win. You may go to the scales and lose, and what was a great day all of a sudden turns into it wasn't good enough. And that's the thing that can make it unfun in the end. But some people like the challenge. Some people like to gamble, and some people like that adrenaline rush of maybe something happening and winning. So, love to get your feedback. Love to get y'all's take on this, and see just kind of what your thinking is. I appreciate the people who have stuck with the podcast. It's been kind of up and down. During the summer months, it's been a lot more steady. Here in the fall, which is when this one is being taped, early part of November of 2021, I'm into deer hunting mode through October. So I've been kind of slack. I've had a few on the shelf and tried to put a few out. So I appreciate your patience. There's going to be more and more as we get out of deer season here in a couple of weeks toward Thanksgiving. And there'll be more and more of these getting put up. And the videos, too, on the YouTube channel. Doing about one a week right now. Generally in the wintertime, the following winter, the viewership and subscribers and everything else just slows down. And that's a lot of that season. When it starts to get cold, a lot of the country is not fishing anymore. There are other people that are like me. They're going into the woods hunting. Catfish are not always, which is what a lot of my content is. People are not fishing. They don't have fishing on their mind. So still putting out content, still putting out one a week. But that will probably get ramped up after the first of the year. So I appreciate all you guys that are consistent listeners, consistent watchers of the stuff on YouTube. And we'll try to keep it cranking, keep it going, and keep it out there. But that's it for now. Until next time, we'll catch you out on the water. Well, folks, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Here are a couple more videos that I think you're going to like. I'd watch that one and then that one. No, do that one first and then that one. I don't know. Just watch them both. They're both good.